It's 2025, the world is unraveling. Prices are up, trust is down, and institutions you thought would protect us, like your work, your government, or your insurance policies, well, they're all just trying to survive. But what if I told you that the money that you pay into insurance, whether directly or indirectly, through your work or through the insurance company directly, that you're counting on, that money is actually going to a massive Ponzi scheme. Now, I've been mulling over whether to do this video, because insurance, to be quite frank, is boring. But this affects us all. It affects our families, our communities, and most importantly, us. And the topic of insurance has been around since the times of ancient Babylon and ancient Greece. And what's happening today affects everyone worldwide, because the money that you give to insurance companies are legally required to be invested in government debt. But the truth is, that debt is anywhere but safe. That debt is a Ponzi scheme. But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's define what an insurance policy actually is. We can think of it as a shield. For example, you pay your insurance, your car insurance, every single month so that whatever happens, let's say you get into a crash, you hurt somebody in a crash, you get carjacked, well, just call your insurance and they'll pay out. But the money that you give them, they don't just sit in a vault. They actually get invested. And a majority of that money that you give them, called the premium, is actually invested in safe assets. What the heck does that mean? Well, let's map this up. You pay the insurance, which are the insurers, and the insurers will buy these things called government bonds. This is government debt. The government will just spend that money on various things, like maybe building roads, social security, defense, health insurance. And when it doesn't have enough money, well, the government can always just print money. And when they do that, inflation goes up. And when inflation goes up, that actually means that your payout value actually goes down. So if all that didn't make sense, what you need to know is that the money that you give to insurance is actually invested in government debt, which are bonds, notes, and bills. And you might know that the US is actually very heavily in debt, $30 trillion worth of debt. And as the government borrows more, prints more, they will devalue the dollar. And at the end of the day, if you don't know how to protect yourself against that, you'll be the sucker holding the bag. So let's break it down another way. We all know that the government, especially the US government, loves to spend, and they actually don't make enough money to support that spending. It's like you work and you earn a paycheck, and your paycheck is, let's say, $2,000, but you're spending $3,000, $4,000, $10,000. So in order to support that spending, you need to borrow money. That's what the government is doing. And the government borrows money in the form of bonds, which are US Treasury bills, Treasury notes, and bonds. And the money that they borrow, they spend on military spending, healthcare, social security. And when they sell these bonds, they are considered safe assets. Why are they considered safe? Because they're backed by the full faith and credit of the US government. But here's the thing. Insurance companies all around the world are required to park all the trillions of dollars that they collect from insurance premiums, and they are required to put that all into that debt. Well, not all, a majority of those premiums into that debt. So you pay into the insurance scheme, and they are parked, that money is parked into this crappy government debt, which pays for US spending. That's the definition of a Ponzi, right? So how is that different than multi-level marketing, where, the guys at the bottom actually make no money, they lose money, but the guys at the top makes money, because the guys at the bottom, they have to pay like a monthly fee, and all that fee trickles up to the top. So the guy at the top makes the most. Where the money is coming from are those fees that the guys at the bottom have to find somewhere. Except here, there are 3 levels. There's you, the guy at the bottom, the insurance company, who is 1 level above you, and the US government, who gets majority of the money. But here's the catch. Like I said, the US government is heavily in debt. $37 trillion worth of debt. And it needs constant buyers of that debt. And insurance is a very big part of that system. Sure, in the past, there was also the ultra wealthy, there was China and Japan, who used to be part of the system and were big buyers of that debt, those bonds. But over the years, with everything that's happening right now, they've actually slowed down or altogether stopped buying US government debt. So what happens when China and Japan actually stops buying our debt? Well, the government decides to print their own money to buy their own debt. So it's basically using our example before of you getting most of your money from your work. Well, now you're going and finding monopoly money from your monopoly board games and using that to pay. But in the real world, that actually causes inflation, which is bad for both our living costs and our insurance coverage. But we'll talk more about that later. So this whole entire scheme really only works if everyone believes that the US government can actually pay their debt. But in 2023, the US had their credit rating downgraded from AAA, which is the best grade, to AA+. That is a sign. It is a sign that even the most trusted borrower maybe isn't that trustworthy. But the problem is that insurance companies can't stop buying. They're required by law to buy the crappy debt. So how does that feel to know that the insurance that you're paying for is not exactly safe? Because if the government defaults, that means you're basically taking your money and throwing it into a fire. The money that you're paying into insurance is actually propping up a giant debt machine. So for now, things are fine. The latest reported inflation rate is at 2.7%, and that was back in June 2025. The current bond rate, how much interest you get paid, is currently at 4.25%. So it's higher. But the US government is having a lot of trouble selling their debt, selling their bonds, just because people are so aware of how much debt the government owes. I mean, $37 trillion. And like a Ponzi, this scheme will only work as long as the government can keep the money flowing in. But the confidence for the US government is shaking. And when confidence breaks or inflation spirals, then the illusion will collapse. You may never get back what you're owed, and if you get back whatever you can, it might be worth a lot less than what you think it will be. Ultimately, what it means is that the government will have to print money, and when they print money, it causes inflation. And when that goes out of hand, it goes into hyperinflation. And that is when shit really hits the fan. So here's the part that they don't advertise with insurance. With insurance, what you're really doing is you're offsetting risk, right? That's what you pay insurance for. But in reality, what you're doing is you're actually taking on another sort of risk that they don't advertise, the one where insurance doesn't pay out. And it's easiest to explain with an example. Let's say you bought a life insurance or a health insurance policy for $500,000. That means that if anything happens, you're gonna get a $500,000 payout. Sounds good today. But let's say that inflation starts climbing to 5, 7, or 10% respectively. And then let's say that you had a heart attack, which on average is apparently a $25,000 cost for a hospital stay. With 10% inflation, if you had that heart attack next year, instead of paying $25K, you'll now have to pay $27,500 because of that inflation. So the cost of that hospital stay went up $2,500. But did your policy go up $2,500? Did it go up from $500,000 to now $502,500? No, it didn't. And that's not the worst of it. Inflation, the debt, the bond rates, they all affect whether your claim is going to be successful or not when something happens. And how it affects the claims is that it increases costs. And insurances are business after all. So what they want to do is they want to stay profitable. They will see the inflation, they will see US's debt, and they will go into defense mode. So their strategy when you go ask them for a claim is that they're going to deny, they're going to delay, they're going to stall as much as possible and dispute your health claim so that you're eventually going to give up, or better yet, you die and they keep your money and they will never hear from you again. Because let's put it this way, if you, let's say you were the insurance company and you have a lot of claims, you have some people that have terminal illness and you're looking at your balance sheet and you're asking whether you're going to stay profitable or not. Now you see this person with, let's say, terminal cancer stage 4 and they're going to die. You know it, they know it. Are you going to pay to keep their lives as comfortable as possible leading on to the day that they finally die, which you don't know when they're going to die? Or do you want them to die as soon as possible so you stop paying them and you keep that money for yourself so you can play your employees, which they have families of their own. Now, here's the scary part for insurers right now. Many insurers are locked in to yields pre-2022 when there was low interest rates, let's say around 2%. Now, when they increased interest rates, those bonds that they bought at 2%, they're pretty much worthless right now, because why would anyone want to buy those bonds when they could buy these new bonds at around 4.5%? That means that insurers are actually sitting on a massive unrealized loss. If claims go up, then they will be forced to sell those bonds that they bought at 2% and then realize those losses. And nobody wants to realize losses. That's why the strategy is to deny, dispute, stall, whatever they can to prevent them from needing to pay you out. However, that is still not the worst case scenario. So what happens if the national debt starts running away? Well, hate to break it to you, but it's already spiraling. Here's the vicious cycle that we're in right now. We know that we have huge government debt, and with that huge debt comes huge interest payments. Currently, we're sitting at $1 trillion worth of interest payments per year right now in 2025. And the government pays for that interest with more borrowing or by selling bonds. But now in 2025, people don't want to buy those bonds, well, because first they look at that debt and they're like, we're wondering if the government can pay that back. So if there's no interest by the people, by the countries, what the Federal Reserve will do is that they will actually print that money in order to buy the government's own debt. But when they print the money, because there's no interest from the people, what actually happens is they cause inflation. And when they do this, it will hurt both the people and the insurers. On top of that, the government can also raise the interest rates for the bonds that they sell. And when they do that, that would hurt the insurers a lot, because like I said before, if the interest rate for a bond is now 6%, the bonds that the insurers hold that pays out at 4% are worthless. And to make matters worse, if they don't manage this well enough, it can run into hyperinflation. And that's when shit really hits the fan. This cycle has been repeated in history. If we take the example of the Weimar Republic, which was Germany in the past, right after World War I, insurance payments were fixed in marks. But what happened was hyperinflation happened. And let's say you bought a 500K policy during that time of hyperinflation for, let's say, the death of a family member. Let's say if your dad dies with a 500K life insurance policy, at the end of the day, you're gonna expect 500K when he dies. But hyperinflation was so bad that by the time dad died, that 500K couldn't even buy you a cup of coffee. More recently, in the 1980s, Argentina experienced 100% hyperinflation year after year. And that basically destroyed insurances and pensions. So just imagine you have a pension that pays around $2,000 a month. I think I have a friend right now that has that sort of pension. And you have rent that is $1,500 a month, which is the current rent that I pay right now. With 100% inflation, next year, my rent will be $3,000 a month. But my pension will stay the same. My $2,000 pension stays at $2,000. So in that scenario, you literally have to decide between paying your rent and eating. And on top of that, you have to figure out every single month where that extra $1,000 is gonna come from in order to pay your rent. And to make matters worse, this sort of event has happened many times in the past. It has happened in Argentina, in Zimbabwe, in Germany, and we've learned nothing. Every time people trusted their government, every single time inflation wiped them out. It's happening now, it's happening in every country, and it will happen in the future. And we've learned nothing. You think that your insurance premium is protecting you, but it only protects you when government and insurers are in a stable environment, which we're not in right now. What we have in government all around the world are basically just narcissists who are fueled by their own greed. So I really wanted to make this video for my future children, because this sort of stuff has happened in the past, it will happen in the future, and I want you to know how to prepare for it. I want you to know what to look for, because it will happen. The writing is on the wall. Today, the signs are flashing right in front of us. I mean, $37 trillion in debt, a downgraded credit rating, bonds that nobody wants, and you're funding the entire thing because your insurers are legally required to buy that debt, that safe assets. Don't just trust the system and trust that the system will protect you. Ask who really benefits from this system? Who really benefits if it collapses? Prepare, diversify, and stay awake because the lifeboats are leaving and I really need you to be in one.